Dr. Knowles, do you have the annotated agenda? Are you going to be doing
I
the opening?
do. I am good to go. Yes, and I am going to be doing the opening as well. I was going to give it another minute just to allow individuals to jump in. Okay, I'm gonna get us started. Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Early Learning Advisory Council meeting, the executive session. This session is meant for members and is dedicated, it's a dedicated time to discuss committee business and planning. As a reminder for those that are new or as a reminder generally, our virtual protocols are during the presentation, please type your comments and questions in the chat box. Once the presentation is over, whoever is presenting will answer questions, or you can follow up using the feedback loop when needed, and open it up for additional questions. So just to kind of allow the presenters to get through in its entirety. Um, so for introductions, please share in the chat your name, where are you located, your role, and today's icebreaker question is going to be, what's one thing on your summer bucket list this year? So we're going to allow some time for individuals to drop their introduction in. Hey, these are great. Continue to drop them in. These are some pretty good ones. I feel like maybe I should do more than read a book for the summer, but that's what my bucket list is. But ocean water, really good. I'm seeing a lot of oceans. These are really good. Trip, summer, concert, vacation, really good. These are great. Continue to drop those in, and we will continue to move forward. So I'm going to review the meeting materials now. The copies of the last meeting minutes from the April 14th minute meetings were sent out in advance for everyone to review. Are there any questions about those meeting minutes? Okay. And if there's no questions, I'm going to pause for a second and ask for approval on those meeting minutes. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Jen. Great. Thank you. All right. I'm seeing no thumbs down. That's a good thing. Um, and now I'm going to ask questions about the feedback loop that was sent out for this particular meeting. Any questions on the feedback loop documents? There's a question in the chat. Is there a glossary for the various three-letter acronyms in the document? Um, it's a good question. I'll refer to other members who may know the answer to that.
We will go back and re-edit these because yeah, we do need to do better at using full terminology, not just acronyms. So thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you, Jay. That's great. Any other questions on the feedback loop documents at this time? Good, good. And thanks, Jay, again, for that feedback, as well. That's really helpful. Now, state agency partner update documents. Are there any questions on the agency updates that was sent out from that, meeting, April 14th? Okay, hearing none. And lastly, the regional coalition update documents that were sent out. Are there any questions on the regional coalition updates that were sent out previously?
That document was not sent out because there is some transitions
Yeah, I
with
was
our
just on
coalition
that.
rep. Yeah, but this would be a great opportunity if any of the coalition members are here and if they want to do any verbal updates. So I'll just pause and see if they do.
I can give an update for the North Central Early Learning Coalition. So in our region, we cover the 4 northern counties. We cover Chelan, Douglas, Grant, and Okanagan. And we recently have been working on our partner mapping and reporting back to Washington Communities for Children on all of the partners that we have been engaging with this year and strategizing on how we're going to utilize that momentum moving forward into the new fiscal year. We also recently are partnered with Help Me Grow and working on getting a resource coordination platform set up for the 4 northern counties. And we're going to be having our regional lead retreat next week. And we're going to be working on strategizing around getting that website set up and kind of what the framework is going to look like for the following year.
Pauline, go
Great,
ahead.
thank you, Nana.
Yeah, I can give a couple of updates. So I am the lead for the Inland Northwest Early Learning Alliance. And we are working on some similar projects around partner mapping and some fundraising strategies for the coalition, hoping to diversify our funding moving forward. We continue to work with our local school districts and other partners on a coordinated recruitment and enrollment project that is being funded by WAS, STEM, and their Catalyst grants. And then for WCFC as a whole, we have our all network meeting actually tomorrow morning. And at that meeting, we're going to have an update from DCYF as well as a couple presentations around progressive revenue and kind of what's happening in our state with those efforts, and just some historical information around taxes and that type of information. So really looking forward to that all network meeting tomorrow. That is open to anybody. If anyone is interested in joining, please feel free to put your email in the chat and I will get you added, or send you, I guess, the registration link for that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for that. Thank you both for that update. Really good information. I do see another question for Jay. Are those partners sorry for the kiddos. If and how libraries can be one of those partners. Can you give a little bit more insight for that question?
Sure, it's probably easier if I just talk. So I'm the Washington Library Association rep and would just love to kind of see how libraries can be a partner, particularly in some of the more rural parts of the state. I think, libraries are really working to support that early learning development. And so just wondering, are they being considered? How could we kind of bring them into that partner mapping? How might they help with some of that partner mapping? Who are they working with that could maybe inform some of that process as well? So would love to be a resource for that, however I could, or certainly just put that on people's radar as a possibility. Thank you.
Yeah, Jay, I can speak to that. I will try to drop that in the chat. It can share the mapping for our region, and our North Central Washington libraries are a huge partner with our coalition.
Awesome. Thank you. And I go by Liz, J. Elizabeth. I go by Liz. Thanks.
Liz, also just for in WELA, libraries are also a huge part of our coalition. So we have regular partnership with them, and they actually helped quite a bit in our partner mapping project that we were working on this last few months. So yeah, not that that is true everywhere and for all of the coalitions, participation and whatnot varies, but we're very thankful to have our libraries at the table with us all the time.
Super. Thank you. Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Liz. That was really good and insightful question. And just as a reminder, everyone, these all will be reshared during the public meeting as well. And so if there's anything that come up in between now and the public meeting here in about 15 minutes or so, they will be reshared and you'll have an opportunity then. I am going to turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you, Dr. Knowles. Apologies to everyone that my camera is not on. I'm having some technical issues where it wants to update itself every single morning. And so while it's doing that, it doesn't let me turn on my other one or use it. So again, apologies, but I'm very excited for this next section of our meeting today. I have the privilege of introducing Laura Murphy, who is a longtime ELAC member and a board member of the Washington Child Care Centers Association. So I'm going to pass it to Laura to introduce herself and make some remarks on why she's interested in the seat. After that, members will have a chance to vote with a thumbs up, abstain, or use the X option for no, and majority vote will win. So I will kick it to you, Laura, and then I can redo instructions on voting as well.
Hi, my apologies for being late logging in. I have a staff member with a serious emergency, and so I have been dealing with that. But anyways, I'm here today. I am a board member for the Washington Child Care Center Association, and I have been serving for approximately 5 years. So we have been meeting across our state with providers to really understand their needs and situations affecting them in the field. And then we've been working to elevate their voices in Olympia, meeting with legislators, and really trying to change our field for the better. I am a long-term childcare provider. I was a home provider from 96 to 99, and then opened my first center in 1999 to present. I have 2 centers, 33 staff members, and serve both private pay, working connections clients, as well as 47 contracted ECAP slots. I have a huge partnership with my community here. We just had a town hall meeting and I was able to round up 45 providers and 2 legislators and 4 candidates. So I am just looking to increase provider voice across our region, and I'm interested in a seat here to try to help with elevating provider voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I will just remind folks, Laura is interested in joining the ELAC Executive Committee, which is the group of folks that do the planning and support for all of these meetings. I don't think she did a good enough job of uplifting herself and all the amazing work that she does. I've had the privilege of working with her for many, many years. And as an advocate, she is so strong and powerful. as well as just the day-to-day within her center, and the work that she does with children and families is truly incredible. So no bias whatsoever on my part. But yeah, if folks would like to now, if you are an ELAC member, you can vote using the thumbs up, whether you want to put that in the chat or do it on your screen. You can abstain or use the X option for no. Marlene and Aaron, I don't want to move on if you guys are still calculating votes, but let me know when we're good to move.
Yeah, it looks like the majority was yes. We have no no's, so welcome aboard, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you all so very much. I appreciate that. I'm excited to work with you all in a different capacity here.
Wonderful. Okay, so I will move us to the next section of our agenda. Just some information about office hours that are being offered for ELAC. This is an informal co-chair hosted session held during ELAC off months to create space for connection, relationship building, and sharing positive perspectives across the ECE field. These sessions are conversational and member driven, with insights helping inform ELAC's work and the work plan. DCYF staff will not be present, and the sessions are not intended for DCYF policy or rules questions. In May, the meeting was run by co-chair Tanya. There was very low attendance, and I happened to be on, and I think it happened the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. So not many folks popped in, and the few who did, we were just on for a few minutes, and then we were able to end early. However, the other sessions have been really great and really robust conversations. Senator Harris has graced us with his presence at those meetings, and then a wealth of knowledge and kind of feedback back and forth between members who are able to join and himself. It's been a really great collaborative space. So just want to uplift that. The next one will be held on Friday, July 24th from 11 to 12 p.m. And the full schedule is available on the ELAC web page. And I can drop that link in the chat in just a moment. Oh, it's not letting me copy it, but I'll get it and I'll drop it in the chat for folks as well. And yeah, any questions about the office hours at all? All right. And Marlene, I will kick it back to you.
Thank you, Colleen. Okay, we have 7 minutes until the public meeting starts, so my updates are going to be fairly quick. It's 2 updates and 1 review of the charter, but the first one is the 2026 FSKA report. ELAC is tasked with writing an FSKA report to the legislature every year. And for this year, due to like budget constraints, it's going to be shorter, more like a memo referencing the 2025 report. Jessica, can you put the 2025 report in the chat? It is finalized. It went to the legislature. We have the PDF copy. It is not on the web page yet because it's undergoing some accessibility reviews. But basically, this 2026 report is, like I said, it's going to be a short memo. And in 2025, it was during the October ELAC meeting, we surveyed ELAC members asking what are their priorities for the 2026 report. And the most frequently prioritized category was goal number 2, which was increase early care and education workforce compensation. So we'll do a follow-up with members, like sending this information. But basically the memo will be short and it will most likely focus on that goal and it will point to the 2025 report. So if you have any thoughts or questions, we have a short amount of time here, so please email me, but we will follow up with members. Okay, so for the ELAC charter, the charter is existing, it lives on the webpage, it is outdated. There's some typos on it, so we really wanted to just review the charter, really make it just comprehensive, really readable. Anyone can take this document and really learn about what ELAC is, what the membership does, what is ELAC about in a really easy, streamlined way. So that's what we did. We took the charter, we made some copy edits to it, but there were 2 suggested edits from our DCYF staff around the commitment section. So that I did want to bring up to ELAC members, because ELAC members, this is your charter. You get to decide whether you do want to implement these additional commitments. And so I'm hoping Jessica can bring up the draft ELAC charter. These documents were sent in the calendar invite, so you should have all of them. But like I said, we will follow up with members. Yes. So it might look a little different because, like I said, we're making copy edits to this. And a lot of you, I mean, we have transitions in ELAC, so you might not be super familiar with the charter. We have been making edits to it for like a year now. But basically, these were just suggested edits, and I just want to put it in front of you and hear your thoughts. So I left the comments on here for everybody to review, but we commit to promoting mutual understanding and learning about state and regional needs. This is new, so this would be new language, and we want to bring this forth to the council to see if you agree. You know, sometimes from the DCYF standpoint, we're like, hey, we really need the council to, you know, really advocate for the regional needs. And so we're not thinking like what that could mean for you guys. So go ahead, Lois.
So just to give some historical background on this process and the charter, usually there is a subcommittee of ELAC that actually goes through, and since it is an ELAC charter and makes recommendations on language, it feels like having DCYF staff make the recommendations and it not being done by ELAC members is putting the cart before the horse. And I'm just wondering if it would make more sense for there to be, a small group of ELAC members to take a look at those recommendations before we vote on it, especially since it was sent out Friday, and I'd imagine a number of members haven't had a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I do want to just clarify that the language from the original charter, like it did not change. There's just these 2 additional edits, but I would love to gather ELAC members and bring it up to them and see what they think, hear their thoughts. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, this time just flew by. We have 2 minutes until the open public meeting starts. So I will do that. We're going to take that and seek members. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks, Marlene and Lois and team. I think the other thing that's important to know, Lois, is that we had been talking with exec committee about these changes as well. So these aren't just DCYF staff changes. So I just wanted to give that additional piece of context.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. I guess I can only go by what I see on the screen, and it looks like all the edits are staff. But even if the executive committee did look at it, it's really time to update the charter. We've had quite a bit of turnover, and that's usually a good time to be able to do it. So if the executive committee agrees and the rest of the members, that is my suggestion for this document because it is very important in how it drives our work.
Thank you for that, Lois. I'm wondering if we could utilize some of our office hour time to have conversations with ELAC members that are interested in discussing the charter. I think the next one's coming up at the end of the month, so there's a good amount of time to review for that.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, we're going to follow up with these updates around the 2026 FSKA report, and we'll do a shout out on the focus on the ELAC charter for the office hours. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we can, I guess, stay here, right? Yeah, the Zoom link does not change, and we'll start the public meeting. So Dr. Knowles, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Great, great. Thank you, Marlene. Great. Well, I am going to just jump right in. Good morning again and welcome, members of the public, to the Early Learning Advisory Council meeting. As a reminder, the virtual meeting protocols are doing the presentations. Any questions that you may have, please type them into the chat box. Any comments as well. Once the presentation is over, we will answer questions as we can, or follow up via the feedback loop when needed. Again, it's open for any additional questions from the presenters. So utilize that space. Everyone in the meeting, so well, I guess as a reminder, everyone in the meeting, we should change our screen name to reflect whether we are an ELAC member, an RA, or a member of the general public. So I'll give a minute for that before moving on to great. And then we're going to jump to introductions. So as a reminder, please type your name, where are you located, your role, and what is one thing on your summer bucket list this year. If you shared during the executive session, please share another item just to kind of keep it fun. After reading some of the suggestions previously, I think I want to go to a concert, so I'll add that for sure. And Representative Levitt, I see your hand. Do you have a question?
Sorry, that was a mistake. I meant to hit the rename. Thank you. But good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. Welcome. Okay. And then as a reminder to everyone, the meeting materials were reviewed during the executive session, but we will also share them in chat for review with the public members who want to review them as the meeting continue. Okay. All right. So as a reminder, during the presentations, please type your questions or comments in the chat box. Once the presentation is over, we will answer questions as we can or follow up via the feedback loop. And so we are, I have the pleasure of welcoming Julissa Solberg with the Early Learning Access and Facilities Technical Assistance Support Coordinator, who will be co-presenting with the University of Washington graduate students on finding and recommending recommendations related to employer supported childcare. This research was conducted by the University of Washington graduate students in partnership with and guided by DCYF. Again, reflection time. Remember to share feedback via the meeting reflection survey for this topic. The link will be in the chat. And with that, I am going to welcome Julissa Solsberg, Kaylin Gomez, Maggie Lear, Janae Page, and Yuyan Yang.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm going to be passing it to the UW students to start this presentation. Thank you.
All right, hello. Can everybody hear me? I can't see anybody. So I'm assuming people can hear me here. I'm Janae Page, and I will go ahead and just jump right into the presentation. Thank you for the thumbs up. So the purpose of the project is to examine the feasibility of employer-supported childcare models in Washington State and explore the role DCYF could play in supporting these implementation efforts. The project was developed in response to ongoing childcare shortages, rising costs for families, and increasing evidence that childcare access impacts workforce participation, employee retention, and broader economic stability across the state. And then you go to the next slide. Thank you. Our research focused on two primary questions. First, how employers and childcare providers can collaborate to implement employer-supported childcare models. And second, how can DCYF support those efforts through implementation planning, partnership development, and technical assistance. And then I will pass it off to my group.
We conducted 3 main methods of data collection for this report through surveys, interviews, and a multi-state context analysis. Our survey had 13 responses from a range of industries. The survey results provided an analysis of employer knowledge and interest in employer-supported childcare models. And then the interview data that we collected was used to back up the findings from the surveys. Overall, we conducted 7 interviews across Washington State that represented 24 of the 39 counties. And these interviews were with early learning coalitions and a healthcare association. The key needs to childcare that were found through the interviews were just overall access, the current limited open slots available, the limited operational hours, meaning non-standardized, the high cost for childcare, and then the need for individualized options, specifically mentioning any mental health, behavioral, and language options. And then the key barriers to accessing childcare that were noted were funding for the sector as a whole, and then general capacity shortages in current operating facilities. The interviews highlighted the need to increase the knowledge of employer-supported childcare models and the general need to increase childcare statewide. Next slide, please. We also conducted a multi-state analysis, which evaluated employer-supported childcare and other childcare models from the following states: Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Massachusetts, Montana, New York, Oregon, and Texas. And the 4 main ways that other states are tackling this issue were through expanding childcare supply through provider-focused funding, direct support for employer-supported childcare programs through the development of employer-based facilities, increasing public and private funding partnerships, and then system-level coordination and coordination where the focus is on interested party collaboration and technical assistance help with all parties involved. The conclusion for the multi-state analysis was that employer-supported childcare can help expand access and support workforce participation. However, its effectiveness depends on the stability of the childcare sector and sustained public investments. And then next slide, and I will pass it on.
Thank you so much. Based on our research findings, we developed 4 recommendations for DCYF. However, for the purpose of this presentation, we're focusing on the first 2 recommendations that we believe are the most feasible for immediate implementation. The first recommendation is to provide and market education and resources to employers and employee-supported childcare models. One of the strongest findings from our survey and interviews was that many employers simply lack awareness of the different employer-supported childcare options available to them. Many were unfamiliar with partnership models, available resources, or the potential benefits for employee retention and recruitment. Because of this, we believe DCYF can play an important role in increasing awareness and helping employers better understand how these models can work in practice. Our second recommendation is to facilitate public-private partnerships through coordination and implementation support. Across both our interviews and multi-state analysis, we found that successful employer-supported childcare models often rely on collaboration between employers, providers, and public agencies. While employers may be interested in supporting childcare, many do not know how to connect with providers or navigate implementation challenges. DCYF is well positioned to act as a convener by helping build those relationships and providing technical assistance. We also want to acknowledge that DCYF specifically communicated that this project has cost constraints. Because of those limitations, we intentionally focus on our implementation plan on these first two recommendations, which are lower cost and more immediate achievable. That said, our full report also includes two additional recommendations for future considerations, expanding opportunities within existing childcare facilities, such as extended hours and additional support services, and increasing investments in the childcare sector overall. Our research suggests these strategies are important for addressing long-term capacity and accessibility challenges, but they would require additional funding and investment beyond the scope of our current implementation plan. So overall, we believe recommendations 1 and 2 provide practical first steps that DCYF can take now while creating a foundation for broader system improvements in the future. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So as my colleague Eugen said, we created an implementation plan for DCYF based on the findings and recommendations. And the immediate implementation plan is based off of those first two recommendations that Eugen described. And these were created given the policy and budget restraints. So as stated before, the first one includes providing education and resources on employer-supported childcare models to employers. And this one really emphasizes strategic communications and marketing around those education and resources to ensure that all employers can have access to these resources. We recognize the limitation in this implementation plan that smaller employers may not have the administrative capacity to fully engage. And so that's where our recommendation to DCYF really comes in marketing those resources successfully to employers. And then the second recommendation is facilitating those partnerships between employers and childcare providers. And we recommended in our implementation plan for DCYF to have regular check-ins to determine how these recommendations are playing out, along with a timeline suggested of 12 to 18 months. And then we also suggested, or we recommended to DCYF to track the engagement in an online dashboard for employer engagement in these programs. Next slide, please. So overall, the key takeaways from their research and recommendations are that employer-supported childcare is a viable option that does increase access to childcare and improves employee retention for employers. Second, the most immediate barrier to implementing employer-supported childcare models is a lack of knowledge around its structure and benefits, which is where our implementation plan really comes into play. And then also, other states have implemented effective employer-supported childcare models with public and private investment. And lastly, we recommend that DCYF should take the lead on marketing the model, sharing the resources, and facilitating these relationships. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. So what's next for DCYF? How do we take what the UW team has gathered and expand on that? We've kind of broken that up into 3 categories. We plan to gather to continue the exploration of past employer-supported care programs like Commerce's family-friendly workplaces that has a great toolkit. How do we look at those previously created resources and modify or take into consideration what they offer? We also plan to learn more from employers, continue to talk to them to understand gaps in knowledge, the connection to ECE, and look at the engagement there. For example, employers have been recently applying for the Early Learning Facilities grant, and in this grant, I was able to score some of them, and I was able to see kind of a disconnect and knowledge from employers on how to open and operate a facility. And lastly, in the gather phase, we are looking to establish a definition of what an employer is. When we're talking about employers, are we talking about school districts, for example, and kind of to solidify the applicable audiences there. And then the next phase will be to develop, create FAQs covering kind of the partnership pathways, the shared cost models, the regulatory requirements, and RFQ best practices for early learning providers. And then after that, we will go to the final phase of create the centralized resource hub for employers and the opportunities for employers to connect with DCYF. So a lot of what we heard from the UW team is the lack of knowledge. There's not a centralized location for employers to go to gather this information and learn more. Next slide, please. All right, this time we are open for questions.
I am having some tech issues. Can you all hear me okay? There are a couple of questions in the chat, but Representative Levitt, feel free.
Thank you so much. I don't know why. Oh, there. I had my video on. Quick question. The budget is going to be extremely difficult as we go into this session, and I worry about a fiscal cliff we're about to go over. So when this study and analysis began, can you talk a little bit about the intent of what was expected on the outcome side? Because if the intent was to make a case for expansion or investments, additional investments, that would be helpful to know. Or was the intent just to gauge the landscape, recognizing and without budget or programmatic implications? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So from the beginning of this project, we gave parameters that there is currently not any money to expand programs. And so they really led with what can we do within our current parameters.
I'm not sure if that answered the question, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
Representative,
good,
did
good.
that answer your question or did you want additional information there?
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that nobody has set expectations of what
Yeah.
will and won't happen this upcoming session because very difficult choices are going to have to be made. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think part of what the group was really trying to look at as, as childcare is a topic for families and employers, are there things that, resources that we already have that we could perhaps package in a different way? So as employers are thinking about supporting their families and accessing care, that we might be able to do something on our website or put together a package of materials that would be useful for folks. So really thinking about how do we utilize and leverage our existing resources given the current budget constraints.
Thank you for that. There was another question. Are there any publications or posters yet done on the research that was pulled? If so, is it possible to understand more of the methodology and the intent behind the study, and how the findings map back to the research question? Is there a plan to follow up and do additional research?
Yes, there are currently no publications or posters yet for the research. Part of the team's project, what they did create a final report that we will not be We will not be publishing the full report, but we will have probably a summary that'll be located eventually. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the rest of the questions. There is a plan to kind of continue with research and to connect with other states, continuing on that. The sampling size covered most of the Washington state, so that did meet our guidelines for that. We did want to cover at least kind of 50% of the state. And please chime in if I'm not answering your questions fully. Yes, and this study kind of came out back in September. The UW students, this is part of their final capstone project, and DCYF had the opportunity to kind of apply to be part of it, and we were selected. And we have been working with them since January.
If it's all right, Julissa, I could speak a little bit more to the methodology questions behind
Go
our
for it.
research. Okay, yeah. So I did just, we do have a whole section in the report on methodology. We attempted to create as large a sample size as we possibly could by reaching out to coalitions and businesses across the state. We did end up with a smaller sample size on the employer surveys than we had initially hoped. But we think that this is largely speaks to the fact that there's just little education around employer-supported childcare, and that's why we are leaning into that recommendation more. We did get a really strong sample size for interviews across the state, as we were able to interview coalitions that represented 24 of the 39 counties, which was a good portion of the state, and really gave us a good understanding of the needs across the state. And so the findings mapping back to the research questions are really just leaning into those public-private partnerships and backing the education and resources being made available to both employers and providers. That's what we're leaning into. And yes, going back to the budget, that was a constraint around our recommendations. And that's why I think Nicole said it very well, that we recommend really just leveraging the existing resources to really increase partnerships and increase the resources made available, while also recognizing that during our interviews and our surveying, we did hear a lot of feedback from people about the overall just lack of access across the state. So we did feel the need to acknowledge that in the report while understanding the budget constraints.
Then there were a few other questions outside of the methodology pieces. Can you share how the study came into being? Was it a free research project coordinated with the students as a part of their coursework?
I believe Julissa already answered that question. It was part of our greater capstone project, and DCYF applied to be a part of the capstone project in September.
Perfect. Great, great. Okay. And there was one more, but we also are jotting down questions for the feedback loop.
Dr. Brian Knowles, can I jump in real quick?
Yes,
Sorry, I
please.
can't figure out where the hand raise trigger is right now, so my apologies. For those that don't know me, my name is Diana Stokes. I'm a Quality Access Administrator, so I support Jalixa and her work here. And really want to just quickly, before we wrap up, make the connections here. We're looking at employer-supported care as a strategy as we increase access. So in previous conversations, you may have heard of the Access and Living Wage Plan. And so this was connected there, as well as our facilities project that we're currently wrapping up right now. And so we're really being mindful of what are our current resources available, and then what would we like to do in the future when more resources become available, but really just identifying opportunities to make connections to existing opportunities, such as partnering with employers as we think about how do we increase access to care now. And we recognize that there's a lot of individuals that are supporting this work within their communities that we've been connecting with. And we really hope to, as resources are available, continue this work. And we're just very appreciative of working with the students from University of Washington of all the research that they've conducted as part of their school. But thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And for those questions we did not get to because we are over time, we will follow up via the feedback loop. But they are pretty really good questions asked in the chat. Now we're going to pivot. We're going to go and discuss early learning budget and legislative updates. Again, as a reminder, during the presentation, please type your questions or comments into the chat box as you have just done. Once the presentation is over, and if time allows, we will answer questions as we can or follow up via the feedback loop when needed. And so with that, I am going to welcome Nicole Rose, the Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, and Ruben Reeve, the Assistant Secretary of Licensing, who will be providing an update on the outcomes of the 2026 session. As a reminder, share feedback via the meeting reflection survey for this topic. The link will be in the chat. And with that, Nicole and Ruben.
Thanks, Dr. Knowles, and just want to thank our UW students and team for presenting on employer-supported care and the research that they did. And during this time, I think you're just going to hear from me. I think Ruben has some time a little bit later to talk about some licensing-specific pieces as we've been going through and focusing on implementation. I'm going to focus the time this morning really on some working connections pieces. And so some of the slides that you are going to see, I'll go through kind of quickly. They may be a little bit of some refreshers and reminders just to ground ourselves in where we've been and where we're headed. And so we'll do a quick recap. I know last time I was here, we talked a little bit about cost of quality and market rate survey. And so we'll talk a little bit about the differences of those between those two pieces, go into the timeline for implementation. I want to share some of the frequently asked questions we've received so far. And then I'm going to show you a place, we're going to drop a link in the chat here in a moment of where you'll be able to go to find information and updates about all of the working connections implementation. So if we want to go to the next slide. So at the end of 2026 legislative session, there were many different things that were passed that have working connections implications as well as state-funded pre-K. And so we are continuing to review those timelines and the impacts on that, and are working through how we can have some ongoing updates for providers. We've also had questions about how do we communicate this information with families, and just also want to acknowledge that many of the changes require rulemaking. And so we are going through the process of making sure that we have all of the implementation pieces in place as we enter into rulemaking and then provider and family communication. So I'm going to talk through a couple of things on the next slide, just again to ground us of where we're at. So 2689 had many different provisions to it. So we have the implementation of the daily attendance policy. We had the removal of enrollment-based pay and enhanced regional rates, and then the resources necessary to support implementation of these changes, including making sure that there were funds to do IT system updates and provider training and communication. So if we want to go to the next slide. The other thing that is going to be implemented in July is the subsidy rate increases for centers. And so this is just regrounding us in that center rate increase, where centers will go to the 85th percentile of the 2024 market rate survey on July 1, 2026. That was not a change from current law, but as we're talking about these changes to working connections, wanting to kind of package all of those things together. I think some key takeaways from this is that center rates are increasing an average of 22%. And then part of what we see with this is that there are some rate regions that will have some decreases, some that may stay the same, and then those regional rate exceptions have been removed. What we did see in 2689 is that child care subsidy base rates for licensed centers and licensed family homes must achieve the 75th percentile of the market in July 1, 2027. So when we think about the timeline, this July, center rates will go up to the 85th percentile of the 2024 market rate survey, and then July 1, 2027, we'll see both licensed family homes and centers going to the 75th percentile of the market rate survey, which is the 2026 survey, which we're in the process of final review right now. So if we want to go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about market rate survey and cost of quality care in a moment, but this is just that reminder that there are some implementation response rates that the agency will need to achieve moving forward. And so a region must achieve a response rate of 40%, and then the response rate must be greater than the previous survey. And then once 65% is achieved, that 65% response rate must be maintained. And then as we think about our families that have access to care, we are staying at 60% of the state median income for working connections eligibility. Those numbers will change in October, but right now for a family of 3, that's about $70,000 per year. So if we want to go to the next slide. When I was here last, we talked a little bit about the differences between the cost of quality childcare and the market rate survey, and just wanted to, I think, highlight some of those, and then note that once the cost of quality childcare and market rate survey for 2026 is approved and released, that we'll spend some time coming back here and to provider supports to walk through what the findings were from that. But our survey data directly drives rates. At this time, the legislature sets subsidy rates according to market rate data. And so variations in rates are based on geography, and child age range are really based on the data that we get from the survey. And so low response rates can sometimes have different results for certain regions or age groups. And then if or when the state transitions to a model based on cost, we'll be bringing in overhead cost data from the survey, and that will impact rates as well. So when you think about, on the next slide, the difference between a cost of quality childcare survey versus market rate, the market rate survey really is asking licensed providers what they charge private paying families in that region. And we look at child age and provider type. And so that's really what is the provider charging the families. Whereas the cost of quality childcare is an alternative methodology where we can set rates based on what it actually costs the provider to provide that high quality childcare. And in Washington State, we had worked with the early educator design team to really look at what are those buckets that go in that cost of quality childcare survey. Important thing to note is that the federal rules, the Administration of Children and Families, requires states to set subsidy rates based on market rates or an alternative methodology. While we set rates based on the market rate survey right now, we do have federal permission to move to the cost of quality childcare. And so what we do, and what is now in state law, is that DCYF must do both a cost of quality childcare survey and market rate survey every 2 years. So that's just some level setting on the differences and similarities of those two surveys. So on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about timeline, and I see some of the questions in the chat, and I'll come back to those as I can. So this is showing you the timeline on all of the things happening with Working Connections over the next couple of years. And so what you see is right now we are in contract bargaining with 925. In May, we did some informational webinars. We're hoping by the end of June that our cost of quality childcare and market rate survey for 2026 will be published. And then we have our center rate changes that are happening in July. We are working on working through all of the implementation rules for the policies out of 2689, and that will drive subsidy billing, training, and guides. And then, as I mentioned before, we do have some updated state median income guidelines and new copay groupings that will go into effect in October. And I know folks are curious about those as well, sort of what those new income groupings will be and what those new copays are. And we are in the process of finalizing those as well. And then starting in October, center providers will claim payment based on the new rules for the October month of service. As we move into 2027, we'll start legislative session again. We'll be working on all of the things related to licensed family homes around subsidy billing training and those guides. And then beginning in July, you see those changes around family home providers claiming based on the new rules for the July month of service. And then you see the change to the 75th percentile of the MRS. And then come towards the end of 2027, beginning of 2028, we'll be working on the cost of quality childcare and market rate survey and those increased participation requirements. So that's just a timeline of where we are at. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we have gotten some frequently asked questions related to billing that we are working through. And so just want to provide some updates on this. And if I could maybe ask Katie or one of my colleagues to drop into the chat the link to the Working Connections webpage, if that hasn't already been done, so that would be great, because that's going to be the place where you'll be able to find all of the updates related to this. So I think, you know, when we think about billing and attendance, one of the things that I just want to note is that, you know, providers have asked, how are we going to submit claims? And so you're going to use the same process through the social service payment system to claim payments the way that you do now. There'll be some new rules to follow. And as I said, we're working through those, but you will claim payments still through the social service payment system. When we think about what counts as attendance, days considered attended will include the day a child attends, allowable paid holidays, and closure days for professional development. We've had some questions about what providers can charge families for, and one of the questions has been, can providers charge families for absences? And at this point in time, the answer to that is no. The WAC outlines what providers may charge families, and that does not include absences. And then there's a question about, will providers still have the same complete monthly payment even if a child attended one time? And the answer to that is also no. The amount of care providers are eligible to claim will change. And that changes October 2026 for center providers and July 2027 for home providers. I want to reassure you that, again, we're working on the written responses to these that will go in the link that Katie just dropped in the chat. And so let's move on to our questions about eligibility and access. So we have some questions about, you know, how does this affect families right now? And so family eligibility is going to remain at 60% of state median income. And as I shared, there's some new copay groupings that go into effect in October as well. But it's important to note that families will still have copayments that are less than 7% of their share. One of the other things I will just note as we think about what are the other things that are available for families. So while family eligibility limits are not changing, families may still be eligible for ECAP, for Head Start, for TK, and other local subsidy programs, as well as Working Connections childcare. And then we've had questions about how will we be looking at the amount of time approved for families for care. And there's no change from current practice. Child authorizations are based still on the child and family eligibility. Yep, Sarah, these FAQs are going to be available on our website. We're working through the process of that. And so they will be written beyond my verbal remarks today. So the next group of questions that we had are really around implementation. And so there were some questions about, will these changes affect all provider types? And they affect all provider types at those that are licensed and certified. Again, there are some different timelines of when those changes go into effect, but FFN billing is not changing. So our licensed exempt family, friend, and neighbor provider billing is not changing. And then there's questions about how centers and homes will be part of the implementation discussion. And they will be part of those discussions through our provider supports meetings. We've done some webinars in May. That's where some of these frequently asked questions have come from. And we're looking at probably mid-summer, mid to late summer to do some more provider webinars to have folks be part of the discussion, ask their questions, and help us think through implementation. So if we want to go to the next slide, one of the things that we're committed to is just continuing to have transparent communication. We might not have all the answers, and we'll let you know that if that is true, and we'll work together to get answers to your questions. We want to make sure that we have provider support and training that is occurring through a variety of things. So that could be the webinars, it could be training on the updated subsidy billing guide. It could be self-paced training that providers can take. And so just making sure that we're going to have a variety of communication and engagement for providers to participate in. And one of the things I will note is we've had questions from a couple of different places around how will families know about some of these changes, in particular as it relates to attendance. And so we're working on what we might be able to put out to families when they get their authorizations. And so know that we're thinking about some family communication there as well. And Katie did drop in the chat the link to our legislative updates webpage, and that will be a great place to go and look and get updated information. If you go there right now, one of the things you'll see is it walks through each section of the bill, the major policy components, and we'll continue to update that as we can. And as I shared, we'll work on getting the FAQs up there as well. I'm going to pause. I think that's the last slide. And I see Colleen's questions about response rates, and Colleen, I will look for that response rate and try to give some generalizations there right now. Like I said, that report is going through final review.
Great. Thank you so much for that information, Nicole. And as a reminder, any additional questions that have not been answered, feel free to drop them in, or any new questions, feel free to drop them in, and they will be answered via the feedback loop. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Hannah, but I just want to thank you all just for being present, as well, Diana, for your work done with the UW students. Really good information. And I'm going to pass it to Hannah to talk about staff qualification update.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to commend Nicole again for your breakdown and your commitment to answering the questions from our providers. I think that that's going to be ongoing, and we really appreciate that. So next up, I'd like to introduce Brett Skinner, our Child Care Policy Manager for the Licensing Division, Susie Endersby, Staff Qualifications Coordinator, and Samantha Dolan, a work group member, who are going to provide an update on staff qualifications work group as part of House Bill 1648. DCYF has been tasked with establishing a staff qualifications work group to help improve the qualifications, requirements, and verification processes, and members will receive an update on the establishment of this work group and their next steps.
Thank you for having us. It's great to see everyone. Can we move forward to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm Samantha Dolan. I serve as the Early Care and Education Liaison for the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. I'm based out of North Seattle College, and my role is to work with the 27 community and technical colleges across the states and DCYF to support the workforce through credentialed and community-based higher education pathways. So our goal today is to talk about each of these in more detail, but a quick summary of what we're going to talk about today will be first the April meeting, where we really focused on pathways to meeting qualifications. So this included out-of-state experience and training, in-state and out-of-state education verification processes, including the delays in verification and the process improvements that are working to address that. We also talked about credential pathways and higher education opportunities to meet staff qualifications, including credit for experience, recognizing expertise, and bridges from training to credit-bearing pathways. In May, we focused on considerations for work groups recommendations, which revisited the charge of the work group in previous conversations, recognizing compensation is a foundational piece of the work, as well as access to education, credit for experience, the processes for verifying education, and the ways in which we approach community-based and out-of-state training. So going forward, our plans for June and July discussions are going to continue building on these conversations, including continued conversations around PACE, as well as experience, as we work to incorporate these foundational issues into the recommendations and make sure that the work group recommendations are going to reflect the broad experience and different perspectives of the work group members and everybody that they represent in the group. So if we can move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the April meeting. There were 4 main topics that had been identified as priorities for further exploration. So in the first meetings, these things came up, but weren't directly addressed until April, when we dived a little bit more deeply into higher education, out-of-state experience, international education, and out-of-state training. To support these discussions in the work group, we invited representatives from higher education to share information about early education pathways that are available through Washington's community and technical colleges. This presentation included information on program delivery models, which includes in-person, Zoom, and fully online, as well as language availability. So this includes existing pathways in Spanish, Arabic, and Somali languages. We also shared existing bridges from training to credentials, processes for earning credit for prior learning and experience, and noted that these are going to look different at every college. We also shared an overview of stackable certificates and degrees, highlighted examples of partnerships with communities and colleges, and shared available funding and scholarship opportunities. We heard from the group about the relevance of content in the certificates and about a lack of information about options, that it was challenging to find where folks have these different options, including the language options and opportunities for credit for prior learning. In addition to education, we reviewed how other states approach the verification of experience to see what we can learn from existing models in other systems. We discussed several common models, including using employer letters, registry-based employer verification, self-reported experience, and some hybrid approaches that combine self-report with employer verification. So we talked about the benefits of these and some of the barriers and challenges that folks might experience. When we're looking at international education and domestic education, we review the current verification processes, including how education is evaluated against Washington's early childhood education core competencies. The work group identified several areas of concern relating to processing timelines, the transparency of the process, and appeals for decisions that are made in the process. We also talked about different actions that have been taken or are currently underway to address those concerns, including increasing capacity for education verification to try to get it completed in a timely manner. And finally, the group was discussing out-of-state training and our current processes for accepting training completed outside of Washington state. This focused on ensuring alignment with Washington's early care and education core competencies, while also considering concerns relating to documentation requirements and process clarity. The work group noted that we can develop partnerships with surrounding states to better understand the required trainings and make it easier for staff to transition into our systems in Washington state. These discussions were really helpful, and they provided additional information and context that can work to inform the ongoing review of workforce qualifications and help shape the recommendations that will come from this work group. I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues to talk about May.
Hi, thank you. I'm Susie Endersby, the Staff Qualifications Coordinator, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about our May meeting. In May, the work group continued its review by focusing on compensation, education access, education verification, and out-of-state training. These topics were identified because they influence how individuals enter, advance, and remain in the early learning workforce. The discussions focused on understanding the current systems, identifying barriers experienced by providers and educators, and developing recommendations aimed at improving access, transparency, and usability. So I'm going to summarize the key discussion points and recommendations from each area. Compensation was a main topic for the work group, and we really discussed how it's important for the workforce. It affects recruitment, retention, and long-term workforce stability. Members acknowledged that early childhood professionals play a critical role in supporting children, families, and communities, while also recognizing that compensation and benefits continue to be challenges across the field. And although compensation was outside the direct scope of this work group's charge, members felt it was important to acknowledge the connection between workforce qualifications and broader workforce conditions. The group reviewed existing statewide efforts, including Early Learning Access and Living Wage Implementation Plan, which outlines long-term strategies related to workforce compensation and access to early learning services. Education access, the work group reviewed Washington's stackable certificate pathway, including the ECE initial, short, and state certificates, which are one pathway for meeting staff qualification requirements. Members discussed the value of stackable certificates both as an entry point into the profession and a pathway toward additional education, including associate's and bachelor's degrees. The discussion focused on ways to improve access, reduce barriers for early childhood professionals. Recommendations around improving navigation and awareness by creating centralized information about educational opportunities and available resources across the state's community and technical college system. Also reducing cost barriers through continued support, such as grants, scholarships, and having substitute coverage so that teachers can use time for their education. Third was encouraging responsive program offerings. So including the online options, evening and weekend classes, multilingual instruction, cohort models, and community-based pathways. And finally, improving connections between the educational pathways, including stackable certificates, CDA programs, and PACE, so that professionals better understand how those pathways connect to one another and how prior learning is recognized. We also reviewed education verification and the process used through merit. Discussion focused on how education is evaluated against the Washington State Early Care core competencies and how verification processes impact individuals seeking to meet qualification requirements. Members identified opportunities to improve the overall user experience while maintaining the integrity of the verification process. Recommendations focused on establishing clearer processing timelines and providing better visibility into the status of verification requests. One of the examples I can give is sort of like when you order a pizza and you know that it's in the preparation, it's in the oven, it's ready for pickup. Having something more visible for providers to see where their education application is in the process. And the group also emphasized the importance of transparency through clear guidance on the verification procedures, how appeals work, waivers, and available resources. Another recommendation was to strengthen support through trusted community partners and organizations that can help individuals navigate the verification process. For out-of-state training, the work group also discussed situations where international documentation may be difficult to obtain and noted the importance of continuing to work with individuals on a case-by-case basis where unique circumstances arise. The work group discussed the process used to recognize out-of-state training for annual in-service hours, and members generally supported the goal of ensuring training aligns with the core competencies while also identifying opportunities to simplify the process and reduce the burden for educators. The discussion highlighted several improvements that DCYF has already been implementing, including simplifying the application process, reducing reflection requirements, and updating the competency references, creating additional options for document uploads. These changes are intended to make the process easier to understand and navigate while continuing to support professional development and training recognition. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brett.
Thank you, Susie. My name is Brett Skinner, and I'm the Child Care Policy Program Manager. And I just want to say thank you for letting us have some time to talk through this. And I also want to call out Sam for helping present, and for the other work group members that are on this meeting. Just continued appreciation for all the work and effort to make progress on this and work through this. So we're basically going to talk about the June and July progress snapshot. We're getting closer to the end of our meetings, and so there's a lot of work that we're going to be wrapping up together. So we have a lot of alignment on a lot of the topics that Susie just mentioned and Sam just mentioned. So we've been working through that. But we still have some work to do on experience and pace. And so we anticipate a lot more discussion in the June meeting and the July meeting. And these conversations reflect the complexity of balancing workforce access, educational pathways, and qualification requirements. Work group members have raised thoughtful considerations from a variety of perspectives, and we'll continue to keep having those discussions to find the right balance for all of our providers, our workers, our staff, the community, the children. The next phase of the work group's work includes final review and voting on recommendations, which will help identify areas of consensus as well as topics where additional discussion may be warranted in the future. One of the goals that we're working towards finalizing is having an in-person meeting. So we're just getting the final details on that so that we can more easily work through and get to consensus, or get to final recommendations with the work group. So that's all I have on that slide. Susie did the heavy lifting on the last slide. So I think that we are, I mean, obviously, thank you, but I'll also open for comments or questions, and feedback.
Thank you all for those important updates. I just want to remind folks that there is the meeting reflection survey link in the chat. And as we know, some of these presentations can be content heavy. If you need more time to process and form questions, please pull that up and fill that out at a later date. It's really important for us to get that feedback. There is a question in the chat here from Courtney asking, can you remind us what the next phase is after your recommendations?
If anybody wants to jump in on this, my understanding is that the work group will make the final recommendations and they will be written up for legislature. I believe they go to our executive steering committee with Nicole and Ruben before they'll be presented. They are due by December 1st, 2026 to the legislature.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Lee. I'm the Senior Administrator of Workforce and Professional Development in the Early Learning Division, and I have the privilege of working with Susie and Sam and Brett. And Susie, you're spot on. After the recommendations are finalized within the work group, those will then be sent to the Executive Steering Committee, and from there they'll be drafted out and finalized in that report to the legislature due in December of 2026. I see Colleen has her hand up.
I'm not sure you kind of started to answer my question here, but I was just more so wanting to know the process about how these recommendations are being approved by that work group. Like, are they voting on them during a meeting? And then when you say the executive committee, are you referring to the executive committee of ELAC or of that work group? I'm just kind of curious of that because I want to make sure I am hearing feedback from the field that there are recommendations being uplifted and shared in spaces that are not something that have been mutually agreed upon and were voted on by that group. And so I just want to get really crystal clear on how these recommendations, like I know the work group is meeting and stuff, but who's writing the recommendations, who's voting and approving the recommendations, and each of those steps.
Thanks, Colleen. Those are important clarifying questions. In these meetings that we've been having every month, we've been having discussion about topics. We've been ensuring that we all have the same information. So there's been a lot of like education and presentations, as Sam had mentioned in her portion, just so everyone has and is operating from the same information. And so that's and that's what we've been focusing on. And throughout this process, we've been taking temperature checks around where the group falls. And as Susie and Brett had mentioned, there are a lot of varying opinions. And so through that process, we have been collecting that feedback, and it is really in our in-person meeting where we're going to have voting processes where we're going to get a sense of where the group stands in terms of each of those positions. And so that information is sent to the Executive Steering Committee, and you're so right to want to clarify. That is not the ELAC Steering Committee or Executive Committee. That is the Executive Steering Committee for the work, the 1648 implementation of the staff qualifications work group. And that consists of agency leadership like Assistant Secretaries Rose and Reeves, as well as representation from across the agency like the Office of Tribal Relations and the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, just so that we are ensuring that we have agency support and that we're all on the same page about what is being put forth to the legislature in the report.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate that. And just hoping that we can flag for the feedback loop, maybe links to all of that information as a membership for that executive or steering committee there. And when the report for those recommendations comes out, I think that would be really helpful to keep in our feedback loop for you all.
You got it, Colleen. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Again, our office hours are a great place to bring more questions if you have them and they come up at a later date. Just in the interest of time and taking care of yourselves, we're going to take a quick break. So we're going to take a break for 5 minutes and be back at 11:10. Welcome back, everyone. So we're running a little bit behind. We're going to go ahead and just jump right back in. So reminder during the presentations to remember to type your questions in the chat. And we'll try to get to those at the end of the presentation if we have time or add them into the feedback loop. I would like to introduce our next presenter, Kimberly Burgess Sims. She's the ECAP Senior Administrator who will receive updates on current and upcoming ECAP expansion activities and updates on the Pre-K Promise Subcommittee nomination process. Discussion with members will inform a broader conversation around ECAP access and planning and future implementation efforts. And I will pass it to Kimberly.
Hello, everyone. Thanks. It's really great to be here. There's so much exciting news to share. So today I'm going to provide some updates, as mentioned, on our upcoming planning for long-term ECAP expansion, as well as our first round of funding going out for the next school year. Some of what I'm going to share today will be new, but much of it I shared at our last ECAP meeting. And so for those of you who have already heard some of this, I did want to put the discussion questions that I have into the chat so that you can be reflecting on that, because I really would love to hear some more input from all of you on our planning. So put those in the chat, and I will share some of the same information I did last time, but also have some new updates for you. So just as a reminder for everyone, this spring, the photo that's showing here is from when Governor Ferguson signed into law a bill that created the new Pre-K Promise account, which allows funds to flow from Balmer Group to DCYF to expand access to the Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program, ECAP. This new grant commitment will support the creation of up to 10,000 new school day ECAP slots over 10 years. So this is a really significant philanthropic commitment and public-private partnership. And the investment would be up to approximately $170 million annually. I think the stability of this commitment really offers us collectively to thoughtfully plan for ECAP expansion in a resourced environment. It's been really exciting for me to come in and to see the response from providers across our state who are really motivated to provide ECAP services to more children and families. A couple of key points about this funding: to draw down the philanthropic funds, the state does need to maintain our current funding level and slot levels. That is one requirement of the new investment from philanthropy. We also, as the state, if the state does increase our ECAP rates, Balmer Group would also increase the rate that they're giving per slot. And if providers are able to build capacity to expand more quickly, we will be able to draw down more of that up to 170 million sooner in the earlier years. So these are just a couple key points about the philanthropic, this grant from the Balmer Group. And the funds will support direct ECAP services. It'll support quality support, curriculum, complex needs, and also has a small administrative rate for DCYF to manage the program. We are really excited, as I mentioned, about the expansion that's going to happen with these funds in this next school year. But we know it will take some time to ramp up to fully utilize the investment. And I'm really looking forward to working with you all at ELAC and the upcoming Pre-K Promise subcommittee that is forming as we plan for the long-term expansion. I know you all are going to be essential partners in this effort to really bring more high-quality preschool to more kids and families. We know that it has a potential to really meaningfully impact children's health and development and educational outcomes over the long term, and also promote family economic mobility and well-being. So it's really important and really exciting. And this first year is going to be a learning opportunity for us about how the expansion happens and what we need to do to be sure that we can continue to expand to reach all eligible families. So the next slide just has a couple of our initial expansion steps we've taken. Last time I came to talk with you, some of these had not yet, we were kind of in progress on them, but we over the winter did a lot of outreach following the announcement of the public-private partnership with our key partners, with you all, with our current ECAP contractors, to hear people's thoughts on this exciting opportunity and really have robust discussions. We surveyed our current contractors to learn about their input, both on the short and long term, and had a lot of discussions with them. And then this spring, in March, we posted our first request for applications for this first round of expansion on the Monday following that bill signing establishing the Pre-K Promise account. The RFA was open to both current ECAP contractors as well as other organizations who are eligible and interested in becoming contractors. Along with the RFA, we also published an updated ECAP pre-K saturation study that helps us look at it estimates the number of 3 and 4-year-old children who are eligible for ECAP in each school district across the state and compares that with the number of publicly available pre-K slots in those districts. And this has been a really important tool for us to ensure that we're expanding in areas where there are identified needs and a population of children who are eligible for ECAP, and to responsibly expand and kind of assess that saturation level of pre-K in areas of the state. We know that many applicants were able to use that information, and we were able to use that information as we reviewed applications for awarding slots. We also, in April, posted our updated ECAP performance standards. We do this annually as we continually work to update our standards with feedback from the community and from our ECAP requirements work group and others. On May 1st, and I will share more on my next slide on this, on May 1st, we sent out notification of tentative awards to applicants. And we have been working since then to finalize contracts before July 1st, the start of the new school year. Like I said, I'll share a little bit more on the outcomes of that funding opportunity on the next slide. And these last two bullets on the right highlight a few additional efforts that we have made to support long-term expansion planning. So because we know that there are many organizations who might be interested in becoming an ECAP contractor as ECAP expands, but are still learning about what it means to be an ECAP contractor or a subcontractor providing ECAP in partnership with a contractor, we we launched a new foundation, ECAP Foundations orientation course online that's available for folks to use as a tool to kind of assess where they're at, what it might take for them to be ready to be an ECAP contractor or subcontractor. And we hope that that will be a useful tool as kind of a first step towards providing additional information to potential providers. And then we've also been doing regional training with our current contractors around recruitment, eligibility, and enrollment. And I've been spending a lot of time listening to providers in listening sessions that have been hosted by Child Care Aware and their member council across the state to hear from early learning providers more broadly who may not be currently participating in ECAP about their thoughts and ideas about this expansion opportunity and how we might grow the capacity of our provider community to be ready to expand and serve more children and families sooner. So that's been really exciting. And I will share a slide with additional listening session opportunities for those who have not been able to participate, or if you have folks in mind you'd like to send to those. So this next slide shows, as I mentioned, on May 1st, we sent out a notification of tentative award letters to 30 successful applicants from the RFA. And as shown on this purple line here, we estimate there will be an overall increase in the of approximately 2,500 ECAP slots statewide this next school year. This is really exciting to see that expansion happening from approximately 14,390 slots this school year to 16,885 in the 26-27 school year. These numbers, these final slot numbers could shift a little as we finalize our contracts. But with this new Balmer investment, we really saw ECAP providers and some new providers who are partnering with our current contractors and new applicants respond to this opportunity. We know that as our current contractors who are already providing ECAP had this opportunity to look at the slot type that families wanted, we saw many of our contractors convert part-day slots to full school day slots. So we're really excited that there will be, in addition to the current ECAP sites that will be expanding, there's also going to be 54 new ECAP sites added statewide through this expansion. And this is happening in schools and in child care centers and Head Start, in tribal early learning centers, in child care, family child care settings. So it's really across the mixed delivery system and is really exciting to see. On the next slide, I just wanted to note a little bit about how we're expanding and how providers can engage in this expansion. So as we work to serve more children and families across the state, we hope to see ECAP continue to be delivered in the variety of settings that families choose, and that's what we're seeing in this first year. But we know it's really important to engage providers across the mixed delivery system in how they can be part of the expansion effort, whether that is as a direct ECAP contractor with DCYF or as a subcontractor working in partnership with one of our existing or experienced ECAP contractors. So we're really encouraging providers to collaborate with neighboring organizations and partners as they plan for long-term expansion for the 27-28 school year and beyond. And we know that there are some, we really encourage for those who want to be a contractor that they are serving a combined minimum of at least 75 high quality preschool slots just to ensure there's the infrastructure capacity to support the ECAP model. But we know there are exceptions to that as well. And we're really, as I mentioned, encouraging folks to come to a listening session, to look at that ECAP Foundations course, and start to talk to some of our existing experienced contractors as we think about expansion. We also anticipate that with our newly awarded and our current contractors, we may be able to offer opportunities for mid-year expansion this year. So if the slot numbers I shared is where we're starting out, but if there are contractors who have classroom space available and workforce there, and they know they have families on the waiting list, we may be able to offer opportunities for mid-year expansion to serve more children and families because we have that Balmer investment and opportunity to draw down from that pre-K promise account. On the next slide, I have a map that shows our current locations, ECAP locations across Washington. Next school year, you're going to see over 50 new yellow dots on this map. So I think that's really something to celebrate. And as I mentioned, um, the majority of our new sites are in childcare centers and in schools. It's kind of equally distributed across those different settings. So that's really exciting to see. And we're really focusing on supporting those new sites as they come on and ensuring that we're onboarding and supporting them, but also thinking about all the additional providers out there who may want to be part of expansion for the next year and how do we build capacity for future expansion with those groups. So to that end, I just wanted to share a couple of the existing supports and resources that we provide to our ECAP providers, whether they're direct contractors or subcontractors. We waive annual licensing fees for ECAP providers. We provide curriculum and assessment tools for free to our contractors. So we have free available training and licenses for creative curriculum and teaching strategies gold and mobility mentoring, which is our family support model. And we also offer ongoing technical assistance and support through monthly calls with our continuous quality improvement specialists. I've been hearing as I go around and meet with ECAP contractors about the support that they're getting from that team. We also offer monthly webinars for coaches and family support staff. And as I mentioned, in-person and online eligibility, recruitment, enrollment support. So there's a lot of support and resources that we offer to our ECAP providers. And I just like to share that in these venues so that folks who aren't yet participating in ECAP are aware of those opportunities and some of the benefits of being an ECAP provider. And as I mentioned on this next slide, we've had ECAP 101, which is a great way to learn more about ECAP. But we did just launch this new ECAP Foundations course that I think can really help folks to kind of go a little deeper in thinking about their readiness to provide ECAP. And just a few more slides before we move to discussion. I came to you on the last ELAC meeting and talked about this new Pre-K Promise subcommittee that is being established. There's many different ways to provide input on expansion. That's why I put the discussion questions in the chat today. Would love to hear from you all. I've been presenting at IPEL through provider supports in our tribal working group and with our contractors. But we really are excited to formalize an opportunity for input on our expansion efforts through this subcommittee of ELAC. And really our hope is that we are actively engaging and co-creating this expansion plan with all of you and with the folks who are most affected by the expansion, the families, providers, staff, partners across our mixed delivery system, our tribal nation partners. So please, if you have not seen the nomination form, it's in the chat. Please take a look at it and share with others. We did extend the nomination period through June 20th just to make sure we really got out the word. But I am also excited to announce that we do have already 63 application or nomination forms that have been submitted, and our team has started to go through those. And if you all can move to the next slide, I can share, these are the types of members that we're looking for, or representatives that we're looking for in our subcommittee. And I'm excited to share with you that we do have folks represented from each of these groups in the 63 who have been nominated so far. So that's great news. But we did want to keep the nomination period open to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share the word one more time. So please do take a look at the nomination form. And the next slide, I think we have a QR code, so you can use that too. And I think with that, I'm just gonna, I have one more slide. Sorry, I forgot. In the short term, like I said, we wanted to partner with CCA of Washington to hear from folks about not just the exciting opportunity of expansion, but also what barriers may be in the way as we plan for expansion over long term. And so we've been conducting, since May, I've been doing these listening sessions. I can't even count how many, some in person. The remainder of the listening sessions are in our virtual opportunities. So if you haven't joined one, honestly, a lot of this information that I shared today is what I'll be sharing there, but the purpose, the majority of the time at the listening sessions is really about hearing from providers and we have a bunch of discussion questions, and we'll be summarizing themes from these listening sessions and able to share that back with you all and with the subcommittee, Pre-K Promise subcommittee, when it gets launched. So just wanted to note those dates for folks and make sure you all can share those with anyone who you know who is interested in becoming an ECAP provider, or just is interested in knowing what's happening here and providing input on it. We have heard a lot of interest from folks who are kind of, already somewhat aware of ECAP, but aren't sure for themselves if they're ready and have questions about what it's really going to take for them to, for example, build on what they're already doing in early achievers and what more do I need to do in ECAP, or how ECAP requirements align with their school district policies. So it's been really great to sit with providers and hear from them. And like I said, we'll summarize those themes and really bring that into our long-term expansion planning. Okay, so I don't know if I've gone beyond my time, but I do have a few discussion questions on the next slide that I also pasted into the chat, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts, and I hope you all are feeling as excited as I am about the expansion and the number of kids and families that will be able to access ECAP this fall because of this expansion. Any questions or thoughts on these on the expansion that's happening right now or longer term ideas? I know I heard from some of you at our last meeting, and I took a lot of that to my team, and we are planning, one of the things I asked you last time was about what we should bring to the committee. And so you all said, like, how are we meeting those high need areas? So we're working on some data to be able to share back with you on that. But yeah, opening it up for your input and questions.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing that review. Also sharing continued opportunities to engage. And you may have touched on this, but on the map, I noticed that there was a large population on either side of the state. And so I wondered if you had any feedback from your listening sessions on the central region of Washington and our rural communities in more specific support for them.
That's a great question. I guess what I can share is I am excited that we do have expansion happening in all regions of the state, and that's something I hope to be able to bring back to you to show. So maybe you'll see more yellow dots there this fall. So that's one thing. But I do think that you're bringing up an important point, which is we really do this round of listening sessions is sort of our first. I wanted to make sure we were getting out there early and could really inform our long-term planning with some initial sessions. But I think our next step, we're going to need to do more targeted outreach in certain areas, and maybe you all in ELAC can be helpful, with your regional representatives too around that, because I do think there are some areas of the state where we're without that targeted planning on engaging folks, we may not be able to see that expansion happen as quickly. So let's make sure we follow up on that. And I'm really open for your ideas about how we might, and also for the Pre-K Promise Subcommittee's ideas. We did want to make sure we get regional representation there. And I'm seeing a lot of that, but please do spread the word if you know folks in that region who you would want to see nominated. That's something that I think will be helpful to us as well.
Thank you for that. We will continue to share it out in our region. And I see Colleen has her hand up as well.
Yeah, Kim, I was just going to throw into the conversation that we do have the 10 regional early learning coalitions across the state to convene on a regular basis, as well as collectively as Washington Communities for Children. They're represented here in this space by the regional advisors to ELAC, but just always want to remind folks that those coalitions are out there and that they have a really robust membership already, and they're really great at giving feedback and have done a lot of work via the Living Wage Proviso and other projects on getting community voice into things. So just want to offer that as another support. I'm happy to connect you or others with any of the coalitions.
Thank you.
CFC as a whole.
Thank you. That is fantastic. We would love to further engage. And I think that is a great recommendation. So yes, please let me know what the right way to follow up on that is. We would love to do that. Um, and I think, yes, this we've been doing a lot of this initial expansion, and now's the time to go a little deeper in a more strategic way with folks. So I'm really excited to make those connections. Thanks.
It looks like Colleen can help connect you with the coalitions. As I as well can be a resource in that area. And I see that Laura has dropped a comment in saying that she's from Central Washington and she's filled out the interest form, currently an ECAP subcontractor. So celebrate that.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you all I know you all have helped us really spread the word about the nomination process. So thank you all for your efforts. I'm really excited about the nominations we've gotten in, and we'll be able to come back to the co-chairs and to you all with our assessment of what we got in, and hopefully be able to reach out and schedule a first meeting with that group soon.
That's great. Thanks so much, Kim. Just a reminder as we move on with our presentations to type your questions into the chat so that we can continue to address those after presentations or again in our feedback loop. We're going to move into our next presentation, and that's coming from our licensing division. We'd like to welcome Heather West, Child Care Partnership and Support Administrator, and Ruben Reeves, the Assistant Secretary of Licensing, who will be providing an overview of two recently passed House bills and the implementation plan for those.
Thank you, Hannah. Hi, everybody. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Heather West, and I'm really happy to be here with you today to share out on what we've been doing to implement the changes outlined in these bills, and what we can look forward to. So just to start out, I have a couple slides that just recap what each of these is about. So this slide for 2317 outlines that this change is really not, it allows exemption from licensing for certain school day ECAP or Head Start early learning programs that operate on public school premises or community or technical college premises or buildings. And it exempts them from requiring a license if they meet certain criteria. And in the past, ECAP and Head Start applicants who are working to expand, at times they've experienced complexities and barriers to moving things swiftly through the process, through the licensing process. And so this change will really support these programs in that way by removing that barrier. And with that, this year alone, with the ECAP expansion for this school year, we will see fewer programs that will need to become licensed. And because many of them in those locations, they already fall under either they're already licensed or they fall under that exemption. So we already have identified programs that will benefit for this school year. And from the licensing side of things, although our RCW language is changing, this change would not require WAC changes, so we did not need to file emergency rules for that. With this bill, another thing to just know about is that some providers that do meet the exemptions, they can still choose to be to remain licensed, which might support their their operations better, or maybe their funding or blended program models. And one other thing too is that for programs that are receiving Working Connections childcare or other childcare subsidy payments, they actually must remain an approved and licensed subsidy provider. So we shift over to 2219. This bill supports an increased flexibility for licensed childcare providers in three main areas. We have safety standards, mixed age grouping, and pre-service orientation. So for the safety standards, this bill adds to the existing rules around prohibited substances by specifically setting a zero tolerance safety standard related to high potency synthetic opioids and drug related activity within licensed settings. So that's just a enhancement to what we do have existing in the prohibited substances section of the rules. For the mixed age grouping, WAC has had standards for center programs around mixed age grouping. However, what this bill really does, it really supports additional flexibility for providers to increase support around staffing and scheduling for up to 2.5 hours per day during normal operations, or up to 4 hours per day if at least 90 minutes of that time is used for staff meals and breaks. And then finally, this bill also supports a waive or an exemption for the pre-service orientation for any applicant who has taken that pre-service orientation previously within the last 5 years and has stayed continuously employed or licensed in that time frame, and also if the orientation content has not changed in that period of time. So if we haven't had significant changes in that that training, that would also apply. So as we move to our timeline, we can see some of the steps that we have and are actively taking to bring this to full implementation. So on May 28th, the emergency rules were sent to our DCYF policy and rules office for filing. And our licensing teams have been working on becoming familiar with what these changes mean and understanding how to provide even technical assistance when questions come up of, scenarios around that pre-service orientation and also the changes with the mixed age grouping. We also have our DCYF merit team that's continuing to explore system supports for how to calculate the exemption for the pre-service orientation. At this time, we don't have that set, but even so, there's no need to worry because our licensing teams will continue to work with applicants individually if they are requesting to have that pre-service orientation waived. So just recently, on June 3rd, we released a rulemaking update about the changes for 2219. That went out to the provider community. And we've also established a website. And on the next slide, we don't need to move to that yet, but on the next slide, there is a web link so that you can access that directly. This website will give you just the overview of the changes, and at a future date, we will continue to add resources as well. Moving over to June 11th, just a couple days ahead, the bill will officially go live, or the language will. And since the emergency, since the WAC changes are emergency rule changes, they're not open for public comment at this time, so that we can get them set and for full implementation. However, once those are in effect, we will proceed with permanent rulemaking, which does include opportunity for public comment and also negotiated rulemaking. So while right now there isn't that opportunity, it definitely will be open open in the near future. So in early July, moving to early July, we'll continue to send out another updated communication to strengthen that awareness around the changes, but also to inform that we're currently working on a frequently asked questions resource that will be added to that web page in July. And so it's in the works to get a lot of those preliminary questions we've already received on this topic. And that will be available in early July. And then finally, moving to the end of July, we're still continuing to work to update our WA Compass system to have those WACs, which haven't yet gone officially live, but we will have those WACs in our system and on our checklist. So work is currently underway to have all that updated and tested and be ready to go by the end of July. And then, as I mentioned, that final slide does have the link to the website where you can go and check it out or refer others to as well if they want just that quick snapshot of the changes. And that's kind of a sneak peek, an overview of what has been in the works. Ruben, did you have anything you wanted to share, or we can also go to the chat for any questions?
No, I'm good, Heather. Good job. That website just provides kind of a really overview of what you just kind of explained. And, with these two bills, it's fast and furious on how we change our WACs. And so, but just to encourage everyone to look at that website and which kind of explains kind of where we're at in the process and where we're going.
Thank you, Heather, for providing that overview of both of those bills and that resource. I think it's going to be very important that, it takes time to process and break down all the bills, actually, not just those ones. So we appreciate that. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. There is a link again for the reflection survey for any questions that people may have that come up throughout our time together. Again, it's really important to gather your feedback to inform how we move forward with supporting everybody in this space. So we're going to go ahead and move into our last presentation, which is going to be Emily Morgan, our Deputy Director of Community Engagement, and Kendra Hodgson, Program Management Administrator. And they're going to engage ELAC in feedback gathering conversations that are going to advise DCYF strategic planning. Currently, DCYF is creating the 2027 and 2031 strategic plan and want to gather the input from the advisory groups and lived experts. So Emily and Kendra will talk about what the plan is and how they will cover and hear from members on what successes mean to ELAC.
Thank you, Hannah. And Kendra's going to kick us off today. But yeah, I just wanted to echo my name's Emily Morgan. I use she, her pronouns. And we are really happy to be here with you all today and have this discussion. So Kendra, if you want to start us off and then I'll pick up a bit later.
Happy to. Hello to all. I'm Kendra Hodgson. I'm the Project Management Administrator here at DCYF. For orientation for maybe those in or out side of the agency, we're in the Office of Strategic Initiatives and Collaboration. And one of the projects that we've been tasked with helping the agency with right now is our new 5-year strategic plan. And big picture for the agency is trying to line up this plan with the work of the divisions and also with where we'd like to be focused on as an agency. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we've been today. And as Emily reflected on, part of our time is we'd like to just talk with you. You'll be doing that in small breakout rooms, self-organized, but we're going to take your feedback into our process And we are meeting with other groups like this. And I'll talk a little bit more about just all of the listening that we've done. So if we could go forward, what is a strategic plan? I think this group is probably pretty versed in planning and carrying out big efforts in organizations and across initiatives. So for us, our plan is intended to be, what do we want to achieve in the next 5 years? What really matters most? And I'll tell you that I think the way that this plan is shaping up might be a little bit different than some of our previous planning at DCYF. We're trying to be a little bit more holistic in those big ideas, and then a lot of the outcomes be discrete versus being discrete on the goals and then having to parse through what's the difference between an outcome and a goal. So our goal with it also, there's lots and lots of goals with this, but is really to help our leaders across the agency make decisions with limited resources, limited people, right? For all the many valuable efforts that could be, how do we get really focused, especially when we're talking about new initiatives? And for us, our hope is that some of the transparency and listening sessions that we have done and will be doing are helping to increase trust in how we make those decisions and have some transparency into the process. Go forward for us, please. So we think it matters, right? We think strategic planning matters, and we've been spending quite a bit of time at this. We think it's going to matter not only to, right, our agency and how we orient, but also to the children, youth, and families that we serve. We think it'll help us focus on the important needs. Hopefully, it improves the teamwork across programs, and so we're more seamless in what we're offering to children, youth, and families who are really intersecting with our agency in a variety of ways. And hopefully it helps us work together better, reduces duplication, gives us an opportunity to really leverage and create some accountability on the progress we're making across efforts at the agency. So let's talk about where we have been and where we're trying to go on the next slide. We kicked off in the fall of last year. So the announcement of Here We Go was in September of 2025. And we have a core team connected across divisions within the agency and connected to our group that started planning, what are we trying to accomplish? What does engagement look like? And in the fall, we kicked that off internal to the agency. So we had virtual listening sessions that started late October and ran all the way into January, where we met with staff, walked through exercises, gathered a whole lot of input. With that input from the virtual sessions, we then took the next step to take a look at all of that information and see what kind of themes and trends we were hearing, compiled those themes and trends to then do a second round where we went in person out to the agency. So we went in March and April of this year. We traveled throughout the state, Omak, Vancouver, Port Angeles, Bellevue. We went to our secure facilities at Harbor Heights, Echo Glen, and Green Hill. And again, took that next step with staff to say, here's what we heard. Let's do some more targeted conversations into what those themes could look like in practice, or what additional detail could we listen to. We've also had listening sessions with tribal nations. We're meeting with community engagement groups, and also have had some lived expert engagement sessions as well. Where that's landing us right now is we have started the drafting of our current or the next strategic plan. There will be additional opportunities for feedback once we have that draft in place. We're targeting end of the summer for having that draft out in the world to do again an iteration against it with a driving towards publish for that plan in January of 2027. And then there's the work, right? All of the work that will go towards actually making that plan a real living thing tied to outcomes that we're going to be connected to the divisions throughout the agency on. Next slide, please. So here's just high level difference between goal, outcome, priority, and strategy. The goals, I think we're starting to narrow into some very big high level goals, but discreetly under each of those goals will be unique outcomes, and possibly outcomes that divisions in DCYF are working on together. So possibly there is a licensing early learning, right, pair up under an outcome as we're moving towards a very specific goal. And there will also likely be some strategies around that as well, like order of operation will matter on how we kick some of these efforts off and try to like leverage into work that's also being done. So recognizing this has been the background of where we've been, where we're trying to go, our time together, and in these breakout rooms that we're going to send you to, is we're looking for some input from you. And I'll send that off to Emily for what that is input is and how we'd like to go about that with you today.
Thanks, Kendra. So yeah, setting the scope for our conversation today, and you can go ahead to the next slide, please. We are here to consult with ELAC, which means this is a time-limited engagement. We're coming today, and then we'll likely come back in the fall, either with a written update and opportunity for feedback, or if ELAC wants to hear a presentation and have discussion kind of like we do today, we'll offer that as well. Our goal, like Kendra said, is to listen to your goals and concerns and to get input on the outcome section of our strategic plan. DCYF makes the ultimate decision on what makes it into the strategic plan. But what we do commit to is sharing what we heard today, which that'll be with the feedback loop or minutes that go out after this meeting. And then in the fall, when we share the draft plan, we'll also reiterate what we heard from ELAC, what was used, what wasn't used, and why. And some of the biggest reasons for why some goals or concerns might not make it into the final strategic plan is it's only 5 years and we have to prioritize some things, so it might not line up with DCYF's highest priorities or be out of scope of DCYF scope. And we can go to the next slide. Actually, go ahead and go back to the last one. Before we jump into the discussion, are there any questions? I think I saw one in the chat from Lois. Will there be a document shared with the community on why certain strategies members submitted will not be incorporated? That would be good to share with the draft copy and the final product. Yes, Lois. I'm not sure if it'll exactly be a document, but that's part of the feedback loop process. That will be part of the strategic planning process, is we will come back in the fall, either with a written update or with a presentation and reiterate what we heard today, what made it into the plan, what didn't, and why. So most likely there will be a document that goes along with that. We're just not quite there, so not ready to 100% commit that it will be a document, but we will share that information back. And we're doing a similar process with all of the agencies' advisory groups as well. And then I think we can go ahead and jump into the discussion questions. So like Kendra said, you guys are going to be in breakout rooms to have this discussion, but we have several discussion questions to help you with the conversation and help inform the outcomes of our strategic plan. What is going well with the partnership between DCYF and the early learning field, or ELAC? What would make you say this agency really understands and supports early learning? What outcomes would show that we're meeting your needs or the needs of those you work with or represent? And what barriers would you want eliminated? And then specifically, what would it allow you to do if those barriers were gone? And so to help keep track of the conversation today in breakout rooms, we have a Mentimeter, and it is survey style. So you'll be able to move through the questions at your own pace. So when you go into your breakout rooms, either everyone can take their own notes in the Mentimeter and submit them via the link, or if one person wants to volunteer to be the note taker, you can submit multiple times in the Mentimeter. There is a character limit, but it will allow you to submit multiple times. So if you reach the character limit, go ahead and hit enter and keep going. Any questions on, I know you guys are familiar with Mentimeter, but any questions on Mentimeter or the discussion questions before we send you off into your breakout rooms? And I believe we have until 12:45 for this conversation. So trying to think about how long we might want to go. Maybe 30 minutes in the breakout room, and then we'll have time to come back and share out. All right, I think we're ready to head into the breakout rooms if you all are. There we go. Okay, welcome back from the breakout rooms, everyone. I hope you had good discussions. I see a lot of information in the Mentimeter, so it looks like you did. I'm going to share my screen and give us the opportunity to kind of go through what was shared. But before I start running through that, I did just want to reiterate that the Mentimeter is how we are collecting feedback today. So if you guys were really into your discussion and didn't have a chance to submit anything in the Mentimeter, it will stay open for another week. So please feel free to continue sharing your input to the responses. Um, and so I'll share my screen with the responses. It'll allow me to scroll through. But I did also, just on this first question, what's going well with the partnership between DCYF and the early learning field and ELAC? For each question, I'll give a little bit of a chance to see if anybody wants to share verbally what they talked about in their breakout rooms. Feel free to interrupt me if there's anything you want to share. I'm just going to run through a couple of these comments for each of the responses. Having Nicole, Ruben, and Tiffany at every meeting shows support to the council. New leadership is improving relationships. Consistency and updates from the department, more relationship emphasis and priority for the agency in the field under Tana Sen's leadership seems to be trending in the right direction, but still work to do. Communication is good, action takes too long. Anything else anybody wants to share before we move to the next question? All right, thank you for those responses. And like I said, keep them coming. It'll stay open for another week. What would make you say this agency really understands and supports early learning? We do not feel that we can say that currently. We feel like many of the efforts thus far do make surface level inputs. Thus far, make surface level inputs from providers or field, but still decision making sits within the department. DCYF does listening sessions in various regions, particularly far-flung regions, spend time with providers and coaches. This time felt different, asked interesting questions and connected with people. That effort gives hope to providers. The change is encouraging in how the department interacts with the field. Be more solution-based, go to the field with expectations that we have the experience to shape policies that will benefit Washingtonians. Ability of DCYF staff to remove their defensiveness when getting feedback. We have to be able to have the hard conversations and be self-reflective without taking it personally. It is a system. In-person, authentic conversations with providers. Like I said, I'm just reading a couple of these comments. Is there anything else that someone wanted to share from their breakout room or from their input on this one? All right. I know it's also lunchtime too, so it's a hard time. But I appreciate you guys putting all of this into the Mentimeter. It's really helpful. What outcomes would show that we're meeting your needs or the needs of those you work with or represent? More lived experience or job qualifications in doing the work, not the theory of the work within the department. Stable funding, reduced administrative burden, providers staying in the field, families not priced out. Fewer surveys, more action, untying the agency's hands. Stop hiding behind the legislator. Less fragmentation in service delivery for families and youth as a result of a more collaborative approach across different departments in DCYF. Being informed with new changes and knowing who to send questions to without it being time consuming. Listening and advocating. Anything else on this question you want to call out? All right, we have one more question before we'll talk through some next steps on strategic planning. What barriers would you want eliminated, and what would it allow you to do if those barriers were gone? Within DCYF itself, there are so many different entities. They don't have a great system of communication. Provider has a great relationships with licensors in an area, but in meeting with them, and information comes that licensors aren't aware of the information they're getting is outdated, especially regarding subsidies. It would be great if the information could be centralized. Map of key contacts on the web for providers to connect with the right people in a more coordinated way. It would increase trust if there were more consistent responses to questions across providers. It truly feels like the work groups, ELAC, etc., are all a check box versus truly co-create and advise the work of the department. Lots of frustration in our group about this. That one looks like it's connected to another comment. Remove minimum licensing standards beyond health and safety, creating actual advisory council function for ELAC and its subcommittees. Reimbursement delays, paperwork overload, credential barriers for experienced educators. Remove them and providers can focus on children instead of survival. Remove presentations and add more breakout rooms for smaller conversations. Sounds like that one is specific to these types of advisory group conversations. Anything else on that last question or any of the other questions that you would like to call out before we talk about next steps? Okay, Jessica, if you don't mind bringing back up the slide deck. I also did want to respond. There was a question before we went into breakout rooms, and I know Kendra was able to join that breakout room and answer the question. But Susan asked if there will be a racial equity tool as the plan is being developed to prevent bias and racism in the plan. At this time, we don't have a specific tool, though in many of our staff listening sessions and in-person conversations with staff, there were specific equity questions. And we also have the Office of Equity, formerly the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, represented on the strategic planning core team. So if you have a tool or something that you would like to be considered, please share that in the chat and we will bring that back to the core team. Lois, go ahead.
Hey, Emily, question. Can you just share that name change again for the Office of Equity, and when did that happen?
Yes, and maybe it is not official yet, so
can you
apologies
share
if I'm sharing
the full name and then the new name?
Yes, it is the Office of Equity, and it was formerly the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. There is some expansion happening in that office, so the name change reflects the expansion. And I'm sure there will be more communication about that in the future, so we'll make sure that we share that too.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so some next steps on strategic planning. Like we said a little earlier, we'll share what we heard today with the minutes and the feedback loop. And then in the fall, there'll be an opportunity to come back and have another discussion after the draft plan is released. We'll share what we heard from ELAC, how we used it, what we didn't use, and why. And if you have any suggestions or thoughts on how you would like us to come back in the fall, please feel free to share that in the chat. The options are we could come back and do another discussion, sort of like we did today. So provide a little bit of an update in the process and then do breakout rooms and discussions, or we could just share the information in a written update and provide a survey or something like that for the group to provide feedback on. Something else to consider is how ELAC would like to be recognized as contributing to the strategic plan. So this is something that we are asking all of our advisory groups. It won't be a like rubber stamp, like, oh, this group agrees with everything that ends up in the strategic plan. But we do want to acknowledge those who helped us in this discussion and planning process. So something to think about and will be brought back again in the fall is how to recognize ELAC if you all want to be recognized as your individual names or as a group as the Early Learning Advisory Council. Any questions or thoughts on those? All right. Well, I think that that is all we had today. Thank you so much for your time and your feedback. And I know I've said it a couple times, but just want to say again, that Mentimeter is going to stay open for another week. So if you didn't have a chance to put any of your responses in there, please do so before the week is up. Um, and yeah, thank you so much for your time. And we will be back in the fall to have this discussion again.
Thank you, Emily and Kendra. That was a very engaging, I feel like fruitful breakout conversations. So I am very grateful for all of you spending the time and hanging out to the end with us. I'm just going to go through some closing remarks for the close out the meeting. So if you haven't taken time yet to fill out the reflection survey, again, this is helping us to collect feedback and improve the quality of work that ELAC does. And it is very highly valued by our team. So please do that. And all 2026 meeting dates and information on the new ELAC office hours are also going to be posted on the ELAC webpage. Should be there now. If you're interested in joining those, please do. The next office hour is scheduled for Friday, July 24th from 11 to 12. And I hope to see you there. I should be hosting that. And if you want to have lunch with me and chat more, I'd love to do that. And then our next ELAC meeting is going to be held on Tuesday, August 11th. And we also hope to see you join us for that. And if you haven't checked off any of your bucket lists yet, I think I noted in the beginning, I just got back from a trip driving down to Northern California and saw the redwoods. So I checked one off. And I hope you all get much needed vitamin D and have some fun this summer before we see you back in August. Hope you have a great rest of your day.